Hello my friends, it's June 26th, late in the evening here. It's almost 9 p.m. 2021 of course, and I'm out here planting some grapes because we're in the middle of a heat wave, so I waited till the evening. That way I can water them tonight and then again in the morning before they get hit with the full sun after being transplanted. But what I have here are some Marquette grapes. I don't know how to say that properly. And grapes, they like full sun and good air circulation, like it says on here. You can pause that if you want to read about the grape. But yeah, it says prefers a warm area with good air movement, minimize mildew, and this particular grape claims to resist mildew and black rot, which is good. We get like the white powdery mildew around here, ironically from because we have vineyards around here and the monoculture of the large commercial wine growing. The powdery mildew blows over in the wind and gets on some of the grasses and such, but that's nothing. Hopefully it's manageable. I know there is organic solutions to that do work. I have used the spray. I think it's baking soda or baking powder and soap and water or some oil, and just spray it on. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember mixing some up and using it on cucumbers, and it works. So if I ever have to use it on these, I'll use that, but it claims I shouldn't have to. So anyways, those are the grapes I'm planting, which is sitting right there. They're doing quite well. They're already planted in the soil I'll be using, so they responded well. They came in a small pot and I put them in a larger one with my soil mix. And I built a small 3 by 1.5 foot by I guess 16-inch high raised bed, and I cut some logs from a dead tree and had been rotting in the woods here at my house. It's well rotted wood, it's very light. So first I throw that in there. It's my hugelkultur core. That almost comes up to the first 8 inches of the bed. And grapes like at least 12 to 20 inches for root. So that's why I chose good and rotted wood instead of freshly cut wood. So once this wood gets wet, which I'll show you in a second, it will be easily penetrated by the roots and then provide a great, substrate or whatever for the roots to grow, and should work out fine. On top of that, I'll put on some leaf and grass mulch. It's from earlier this spring, maybe late last year, this pile. I have here is some leaf and grass mulch from several years ago, and this is my fungal dominated compost. It's a cold compost. It's from a pile that hasn't been turned or worked. It's not hot compost. It's being broken down by fungus mostly instead of a bacteria. There are bacteria in there, of course, but it's not a bacterial dominated composting that heats up like you would your kitchen compost. This just sits out in a pile, no effort, just sat there. And then I'm going to mix this in with my soil mix, which I already have mixed up here. And what my soil mix is, sorry about that, kept hitting the tripod on my leg. Okay, so what my soil mix is, I'll just move this for a second. Soil mix is just my native dirt, which is slightly alkaline, and it's well, I guess what it would be called is it's a silt loam. It's not the worst, but it's not the greatest. When it dries out, it turns gray and falls apart. But in here, I got mixed up with it. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's full of charcoal. The light's not so good now because I had to wait till the sun wasn't beaten down. It's I think in Fahrenheit, I think it was 83, and that's only because there was a bunch of clouds. So we're being the high 90s, even predicting up to 100 in the next few days. So I got to get this in the ground, and let's do it now. So yeah, just my native soil mixed with a lot of biochar. I'll put through a 1/4 inch, I'll show you that too. What I did is just sift through the screen. It's a 1/4 inch hardware cloth, screwed between some boards to make a frame. I just sit it on top of the, that's getting caught in the berry bush bird netting. Yeah. So I just sit it on top, I shovel through dirt, and I shovel through biochar so everything's consistent, and I take out any unwanted roots or weeds or big rocks or anything I don't want in there, right? Lumps of clay or whatever get broken up. I don't really mind what goes in there with the soil, because adding the biochar makes it really nice consistency. Gives it a really nice texture, and it keeps that texture. Like I can ball it up, and it's like that, you know, 3 years after I do that. So all I do with this, oh, I was going to show you this too. So grapes also like a slightly acidic pH, and like I already said, my native soil is slightly alkaline. And with the biochar and compost added, it comes out about 7. So it's a neutral pH, which is good. My garden does well. But when plants like blueberries, I have a blueberry plant that's doing well, or these grapes, they like a slightly acidic soil. So I could add sulfur right now to the soil, and that would acidify it. I don't know exactly how much, or you know, and I'd have to go buy it. So the organic solution to adjusting your soil pH is to let nature do it. Now in nature, there are many different mycorrhizal fungi. And these are fungus that are breaking down my leaf and grass compost. This white, see by my thumb here, all these white filaments, that's the mycorrhizal fungi. So that's my inoculant into my soil, because the mycorrhizal fungi, which is also all over this piece of wood, is why I left it here. All this white, kind of creamy, turning brown patches here. And this was sitting on the underside against the soil. This was all creamy, like bright white, like white paint. And that's all one fungi, and it spreads like throughout the forest, and it coats the roots of the trees and provides a sheath. And the particular kind of mycorrhizal fungi I want in my soil is ectomycorrhizal fungi. So what it will do is grow, and it'll grow around the roots of the plant, of the tree, of whatever you have planted there, and it'll create a sheath. And on the inside of the sheath, against the root, it'll maintain the optimal pH for the plant, and it'll help also exchange nutrients and micronutrients from the soil and the plant in exchange for sugars. Right? So inside the sheath that this fungus will create, and I'm adding the inoculant for the fungus right now. So if you did want to use sulfur, or you had to drastically change your pH, now would be the time to add sulfur also, to to maximize its effectiveness, because it will only last a few weeks in the soil. So if you have only a little bit of inoculant and not big piles of leaf and grass mold like I do, like this was all leaves, and it's all now been broken down by fungus. Some of it's a little newer. You can see all the dust rising off of it. That's all the mold and the spores. If I had hay fever, I'd be sneezing right now. It's all in the air around me. But I want this in the soil. So if you have alkaline soil and you're planting blueberries or grapes or something that require a acidic soil, you can get a little bit of sulfur, add it to the soil, and then get some of this ectomycorrhizal fungi and add it also to the soil. And you would only need a little bit, because by adding the sulfur you create a acidic environment, and the mycorrhizal fungi will reproduce, at least the kinds you want to interact with your plant. Right? Your plant likes acidic soil, so you create environment slightly acidic that the plant will like, and then the mycorrhizal fungi that's beneficial to the plant will reproduce the most in those conditions, outperform the other fungi, and therefore you'll have exactly what you need for your plant, right, to interact with. So like for this, I just simply mix, and this is a rough mix too. I wouldn't make a soil mix like this if I was going to plant carrots or something into it. Then I can mix soil. What I would do with that would be to dampen down the compost I just added, and then run the compost also through the 1/4 inch hardware cloth. You kind of scrub it through, and it breaks off in little bits, and it'll create a finer mix. I'm mostly just putting this in here just for the fungus. The organic matter is nice and whatever, and the worms will come up and eat it, leave their droppings and enrich the soil. But with the charged biochar that's already in there, all that is really unnecessary. Actually unnecessary for the next 1,000 to 2,000 years, as the biochar is a stabilized carbon, stabilized form of carbon that will last anywhere from a few decades to a few thousand years. And not just the carbon will be still there, but its beneficial function in the soil will remain. It'll also be providing fertilizer. It retains anything that passes through the soil. So instead of fertilizers or the organic matter is breaking down on the topsoil layer, right, all the nutrients that gets washed down, a lot of that gets held up by the charcoal. It's got a massive surface area, something like 2 grams of charcoal, which is I could hold it a couple fingers and pick up a little piece. 2 grams of charcoal has something like the football field of surface area or something like that. And that all is surface area that can combine with other elements, like your nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. So yeah, I'm not going to have to fertilize. I'm not going to have to change the pH. All I'm going to have to do is make sure the roots have enough space, it gets well watered, it's in a spot that gets good air circulation and gets lots of sun, and hopefully it'll survive our minus 45 degree winter, 45 degrees Celsius winters. So yeah, so now I'm just gonna dump in mulch layer. See if we can get the camera to go in there. Dumping this, this is just out of the lawnmower. Maybe some stuff I threw in there. It looks like maybe some tomato plants from last fall or something. But yeah, this is the same method I use to make my larger beds. Oh, I gave you all a kick there. So you can really put a lot of leaf and grass mulch in a bed. This stuff will seal between the wood and the soil I'm going to put over it. This is going to decompose really fast. Worms are going to eat it all up, and probably even by fall it won't even be there. It'll all be incorporated into the soil by the worms. And that is the primary reason I put it in there. Not so much to take up any space, because it really doesn't. The soil will pack it right down. I can put a lot more in there and still the soil will pack it down. But what it'll do is feed the worms, and I have myself a vermiculture bed or thing going on here instead of in my basement or something, right? Just do it right in your garden bed. All that organic matter, the worms will just be in love with that once it gets all soaking wet. So yeah, I'm just gonna shovel this in. Probably not so much in the middle there where I'll plant the plant. Yeah, and this is the same soil mix I use for everything. Unless I'm planting small seeds in something and doing fresh soil, then I'll run the compost through a screen so it's small, so there's nothing to interfere with the germination of the seeds. You know, if seed germinates, it can push up through 1/4-inch material, no problem. So yeah, I'm just going to get some of this dirt in there and then put the having all this organic matter too is going to help to retain some moisture. And it's really hot right now, so I made sure to put a little bit extra than I normally would for that purpose also. So show you this too. Alright, I have it in the pot. It's been in there a while. How do I get it out? I just turn the pot on its side and gently roll it around, trying to release the dirt from the inside of the pot. So hopefully it comes out a little easier and I don't mess it up too much. But I did let it get kind of overgrown here. A little too big for this pot. You can give it a little feel. It's probably a little too wet. Be all gentle, right? And it's a little easier to do if you let the soil dry out a bit. Yeah. So, oh, well, you see that. what I did there was just kind of drag the pot along the soil in the bed, so as the plant came out it was resting on the soil, because it is kind of wet. It's all falling apart instead of staying together in a big ball. And as you see here, when I replanted it too, when I transplanted into a larger pot, I used a bunch of wood chips in the bottom and retained some water for the roots, and it also made sure that the soil, because I just use outdoor soil mix in the pot, that the soil didn't compact in the bottom and turn into an anaerobic environment, you know, without oxygen, denying the roots oxygen. So yeah, now I'm just going to upright the plant the way I want it and fill it in with some dirt. And one thing you need too with the grapes, of course, is some sort of trellising system. So I've got this deer fencing up around here anyways, and it's permanently going to be staying there. So grow the grapes against that. Hopefully it'll work. So yeah, let's get this in the ground here. Yeah, the soil being wet in the pot really didn't help. But it's really hot out, so I made sure these were well, everything I have is really well watered. Oh, yeah, I'm not leaving myself much room, am I? Oh, and I got it backwards. Alright. Okay. So, well, with this one, you can see all the roots coming straight out. They're not all balled up. Sometimes you get them from the nursery, or even when you're transplanting, if you leave them in there too long or the pot is too small for your plant size, you'll get the roots all balled up. They get all wrapped around themselves. What you do then is just pull them out with your hands at this stage when you're putting the plant in. And this would also be the stage when I'd be adding a little bit of sulfur, probably in a circle around it, not too close or directly right on the roots, if I didn't already have the soil prepared with it, if that's how you're using it. Well, like I said, I'm going to be counting on this ectomycorrhizal fungi to be doing that work in conjunction with the plant itself. Once the fungus is growing over the roots, you can see here, right, you got the roots coming out, all this organic matter in here is covered in that fungus. Right, that's going to grow now as I water it in the dark under the soil and cover the roots. Yeah, that's all. You know, here's the piece of those colorful stuff. This is all broken down. But yeah, so once that sheath is established in there, the wacky camera angles, once the fungi is all over those roots, the plant in conjunction with the fungi can alter the pH on the inside of that sheath up to plus or minus 3, depending on what the plant needs and the soil conditions. So you could have acidic soil, and on the inside of the sheath can be alkaline, and vice versa. Like here, I'm hoping to promote an environment of acidity within the sheath, because I have, with the biochar and the compost, the pH will test around 7. I have a couple of those probes, so I'll stick one in the ground here after I water it. And when you're filling raised beds with hugelkultur, you don't have to worry about putting too much in. It's going to sink down a bit, especially with the mulch layer between the wood, the hugelkultur core, and your soil. That mulch layer, like I said, the worms are going to come into that. Worms are going to come into that and turn that all into worm poop. And if you dig this up in a couple months, it'll just be the soil layer and the wood of the hugelkultur core. Okay, so if it sinks down a bit, I can always add more. Once it's done sinking down, I can always add some mulch on top too, without worrying about having to add soil on top of that again if it keeps sinking, right? So yeah, if you're planting outside during a heat wave, wait till as late at night as you can that you have light to do it, and do it then. That way you can water that night, like I'm going to do here in a second. And you can also water again in the morning. That way it's well saturated and the roots should start being acclimated before it has to deal with the stress of the midday sun or something. A lot of people will plant in the morning and then the plant is stressed all day. And that's not good on your first day when the roots have to acclimate. It'll take about 72 hours for these roots to really get going, so yeah, I'm just playing around. The plant will actually find its own way. I'd just rather have it going more straight up than trying to get one of these branches to go through there. I can mess with that later. But yeah, so again, once you get it on in the ground, make sure to water it in really well. Now I'm going to water not just where the plant is, but the whole bed. By saturating all that compost I put in there, it'll promote the growth of the fungus. And once the fungus finds out we can get sugar from that plant in there, then I don't have to worry after that. That's something they don't really tell you about when they're talking about, oh, you have to plant this or plant that in acidic soil or alkaline soil. I haven't heard very many mentions at all about the mycorrhizal fungi, not in relation to pH. There's lots of videos on it, lots of gardeners talk about it for other benefits. But in this case, it's a perfect example. I got the acid-loving plant, I got alkaline soil, and I can neutralize the alkalinity in the soil with the biochar, as long as the biochar is well charged. I use compost tea for that. And finished compost usually comes in around 7 on a pH, which is a neutral pH. So by adding compost and my charged biochar, charged with compost tea, that brings all my beds to around 7. I can put a probe in any one of my beds and it reads the same. So they all except maybe one, which has a bunch of kitchen compost in it. All the other ones are exactly the same. Soil mix, more or less biochar is really the only difference. The newer stuff has more biochar, as I've seen its effect, its benefit, and just the stress it takes out of gardening, right? Like here with the pH, or you know, soil leaching nutrients, or creating a loose, well-drained soil. I took the silt loam here, which will, after watering for a week on its own, even after being separated through the hardware cloth, will go back to like a hard, it'll be like my driveway, you know, a hard surface. Water just runs right off of it. But you mix the biochar in, and it changes the texture of it. Like adding sugar to butter when you're baking, right? Or butter to sugar, whichever you're adding, right? When you mix the two together, it changes the texture of both. And that's what I'm doing here with this. But yeah, I just keep talking. For one reason is because you need to water your plant in, right? And as you saw, I watered it pretty well, and there was some water on the surface. Let it sit for a few minutes, and do it again. This is also a good thing to do just every day when you're watering your garden. Go over one part. When it looks all wet and looks like it won't accept any more water, move on to the next. But then come back again. And you spray, like here, see, now it's not taking as much, but it is taking some. Then since I did put in dry soil mix on top of dry mulch, I'll probably come back out here and water again. But yeah, just one thing before I let you go, see here if I can grab it. Okay, this is why you put rotten wood, or wood at all, into your gardens, and to make a hugelkultur. Right? It soaks up water like a sponge. I'm just squeezing it, and water's running out of it. This was dry when I started this video. I threw it in a bucket of water. But it's not just like the water that was sitting on the outside. I took it out and let it sit for a bit. Oh. But yeah, you can see it's just like a sponge. I only had it in the water, I don't know, since I started this video. You can see it's soaked through. Dirted away on some parts. It feels wet. And squeeze it. Water drips out. But that'll be inside the bed, right? It's like a core, like a water retaining core. And it's also really easy for the grape roots to grow into. But yeah, there it is. Pretty exciting video. But my soil mix, how I do my raised beds, I planted some grapes. Some acid-loving grapes and some alkaline soil with no chemicals and no fertilizers. But I think that's enough for tonight. So I hope you all have a great day wherever you are, wherever you watch this. Peace.